In Exodus, we practice the Sabbath because it's the design of creation. It's woven into the fabric of creation. In Deuteronomy, we Sabbath as an expression of our liberation. We Sabbath because the people of God are no longer slaves to Pharaoh. God's people rest because at one time we couldn't. At one point, the command was go make bricks without straw. Go produce more with less. And we don't live under the reign of Pharaoh anymore. God took care of that. And yet I find that we still can relate and understand to some of the feeling that they experienced. Work more with less. I shouldn't be this tired. It's the sentence that just kept going through my head 2 days after I'd gotten back from vacation. Because already I was dragging myself out of bed in the morning, and I found myself at work that morning just yawning throughout the day. And I'd had a great vacation. It was fun. I had some really good experiences, enjoyable time with family. I mean, I ate good food. It was a relatively simple but really enjoyable beach trip. And plus, it was much needed time off of work. Before I went on this vacation, I was feeling pretty run down. I was really worn out, and I was getting close to what Pastor Jeff described in first week of being dangerously tired. And so this trip, it was supposed to be kind of a reset. I needed this time away, and yet there I am back at my desk. It's Tuesday, and I'm already feeling mentally and emotionally fried. I shouldn't be this tired. I came back and I just thought, I need a vacation from my vacation. You ever been there? And so I started to wonder, well, what's the problem? Why am I back in this situation already? Why am I already feeling so drained? Is the job just that demanding on me? Or maybe I didn't vacation well. Maybe I didn't get enough rest when I was actually on vacation. Was it too busy? I mean, it didn't feel too busy at the time. I slept in as much as you can sleep in with 2 little kids, but I wasn't waking up at 5:30 like I do most days. I took naps in the afternoon while the kids were resting. That was great. So what's the deal? I mean, I had taken vacation from work. I had stopped working. I had done the first step in the Sabbath series that we've been talking about. I stopped, and yet something was missing because I knew how to stop, but I didn't know how to rest. And if there's one key idea for us that I hope that you take away from today, if there's one truth that you want to write this down, if you're a note taker or snap a photo of it, it's this simple idea. Rest is resistance. Rest is resistance. Good morning. My name is Brian Butcher. I'm one of the pastors here on the Hill. So good to be with you in the house of the Lord this morning. Happy Mother's Day to all the women out there. We are so thankful and appreciative of you today. And today we are continuing this Sabbath series. We are in week 3 of 5 of this series, and we're talking about this idea of the Sabbath. How do we take this ancient practice and begin to implement it into our modern lives? Because if we're honest, it is desperately needed. We really need to figure out how do we stop, rest, delight, and to worship as a regular rhythm of our week. And so that's the invitation of Sabbath. 24 hours in your week where you do those 4 things. You saw it on the screen. You're going to hear say it again and again. We stop, we rest, we delight, and we worship as this rhythm. And the reality is, before Sabbath is commanded to us in Scripture, in the 10 Commandments, it was just given as a gift. It was how God designed things from the very beginning. When God created everything, He did it in 6 days. And then on the 7th day, He Sabbathed. The word means literally He ceased, He stopped, and He rested. And so we're designed to do the same thing. We are called to obey the Sabbath. Why? This is the design. And that's what Moses tells us in Exodus chapter 20 in the 10 Commandments. This is what he says. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything in them. But on the 7th day, He rested. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. So the idea that we've been talking about is simple, and we talked about this a lot last week. We obey the Sabbath because it is the designed rhythm of creation. But interestingly, this is not the only time that we see God's people, the Israelites, commanded to take a Sabbath in the Old Testament. The first command that we just read is given to Moses on Mount Sinai as a part of the 10 Commandments. And if you recall the story, what are what are God's people doing at the bottom of the mountain? They're worshiping another God, right? They're breaking the commandments they haven't even fully received yet. Because they already, just days after walking through the Red Sea, being led out of Egypt in slavery and invited into God's presence and life with him, just days afterwards, they're already worshiping someone else because they can't stand that they aren't interacting with God directly, and they're waiting on Moses on the mountain. So that's the first time that it happens, and they're given this command of the Sabbath rest. The second time, the command is given a generation later. Israel spends the next 40 years wandering the desert because of their disobedience and lack of trust in God. They're preparing to enter into the promised land. And so Moses is reiterating the laws again for them. Here's how you live faithfully to Yahweh, which you guys have struggled to do for a generation of people. Now, as we go into the promised land, the land of rest for us, here's what we must do. The command is given again as verbatim, the exact same command as the first time. But the second time, the justification changes. Why now do we obey the Sabbath as we begin to enter into the promised land? Keep the Sabbath. This is the justification. Deuteronomy chapter 5. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. So here's the point. In Exodus, we Sabbath because it's woven into the fabric of creation. And in Deuteronomy, we Sabbath as an expression of our liberation. You with me? In Exodus, we practice the Sabbath because it's the design of creation. It's woven into the fabric of creation. In Deuteronomy, we Sabbath as an expression of our liberation. We Sabbath because the people of God are no longer slaves to Pharaoh. God's people rest because at one time we couldn't. At one point, the command was go make bricks without straw. Go produce more with less. And we don't live under the reign of Pharaoh anymore. God took care of that. And yet I find that we still can relate and understand to some of the feeling that they experienced. Work more with less. This is that moment in your company where they downsize everything, but you're still expected to hit all the same goals. Your workforce has been reduced, but your goals haven't changed. Or you were offered that promotion within your company, and it seems really good on the surface. You get a new job, new title, new compensation. That feels great until you learn that they're not going to backfill your position. So now you have this new job that's exciting and interesting, and the old one. This is a raw deal. This isn't great. Or remember during the beginning days of COVID, and no one quite knew what was going on yet, and they told everybody go home, shelter in place, right? And everyone got to do that except for a group of people that we designated as essential workers. These were the nurses and the doctors, our teachers, folks that worked at the grocery stores, right? The people that we deemed as a society, if they stop working, if they rest, this whole thing falls apart. So everybody else can go home and take it easy and kind of figure out what to do and learn what Zoom is for the first time and all the mess that came with that. Not y'all. And often for them, it came at great personal cost and exhaustion to continue to work in the brand new mess that things were in this moment. And the truth of the matter is we don't have Pharaoh anymore in our lives, but for so many of us, we have one or more areas of our lives where we live like we are an essential worker. We feel like we can't stop because if we stop, if we do, then everything's going to fall apart. And what it leads to is a life of just feeling like I have to. Like I have to care for mom and dad because if I don't, no one else will. I have to manage the family estate because my siblings are bickering over this. And so I've got to be the one to figure this out or this will fall apart. I've got to pick up what gets dropped at work or we're not going to hit our quotas for the quarter. It's that discouraging, suffocating feeling we get when we just realize the work never ends and there's more work to be done than we can possibly do. And the uncomfortable reality is there is always more work to be done than we can possibly do. And so we can fight that, we can work and exhaust ourselves and burn ourselves out, or we can Sabbath. We can rest as a reminder we don't work for Pharaoh, we live for Yahweh. If we work to the glory of God and we rest because we're not slaves to our work anymore, are we? Are we? Am I? Are you? Because when we're checking our email hours before you show up to the office and then well into the evening again, you're not free. When your own physical and mental health is suffering because you can't keep up with everything that's on your plate, you're not free. Or when your kids' schedules dominate all of the extra margin in your life with your time and your finances, does that feel like freedom? How's that going for you? And the thing that I realized as we've been talking about this Sabbath series is this key idea that what you cannot rest from, you might just be a slave to. What you can't rest from, you may be a slave to. So this is why this is so important. This is the key idea. Rest is resistance. Rest is resistance. It's resisting the things in our lives that just demand that we must keep going. The pharaohs in our lives that say, make bricks without straw, produce more with less, never stop. And so we have to practice the Sabbath. It's the wisest thing for us to do because our culture keeps us in motion. We talked about that a lot last week. We live in a world and with jobs and demands on our time and expectations where we are constantly going to be asked to stay moving and in motion and working. But we also rest because there is something ingrained inside of us that we must take a break from as well. Like my body needs physical rest. We need to get good sleep. That's key and important. My mind needs a break from thinking about work all the time. My soul needs a Sabbath. My soul needs to stop, rest, delight, and worship as much as my mind and my body need to stop. And so when I stop and I rest, I begin to undo the lies that I've been believing in my life, that I'm what the world revolves around, that I have to or things will fall apart. Rather than resting and putting God back on the throne of our lives as a declaration that I will resist that feeling in me and to say God's in control and He's got this. God's my provider, not my job. I can stop and rest. God's attentive to my issues and the issues of my loved ones. I can lay those down for a time and trust Him with it. And when the time comes, I can pick them back up again and serve how He's calling me to serve. But He'll work on it while I rest. And if you're like me at all, rest resists the thing inside of you of that need for control in your life. For me, rest resists my anxious heart. Rest resists the thing in me where I want to know the outcome of any given situation. I want to make sure that I can control it and make sure that it goes the way that I want. Rest helps me combat well, what about this? And what if this happens? And oh no, if that thing goes wrong, and that would be terrible. And so now I've got to work to ensure that those things can't happen. I got to make sure that the worst case scenario is taken care of by my hard work. And rest is an invitation to go, no. That's exhausting. Trying to constantly micromanage your future and predict every outcome will exhaust your soul. And instead, you can rest in the one who holds all of that together. Rest resists and frees us up to trust God in that process. Rest resists the thing in us that keeps us going, like our ego. Rest resists that internal drive that says, I've got to work, I've got to perform, I've got to hit that goal, I've got to meet the quota, I've got to show that I'm the best, I've got to make the grade, I've got to earn the promotion, I have to do that thing because if I don't, then what good am I? What am I really worth if I'm not performing at the highest level? Am I still admired? Am I still loved or cared about? Do people still look at me the same way if I'm not one of the best? It's that ego and that drive in us, and it's not inherently a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to want to work hard, but what happens for so many of us when we stop resting and we're not in this rhythm is that we begin to think that it's our performance that makes us loved rather than God's presence with us. It's our drive and our skills and our abilities that earn love from the people around us rather than actually building relationships and community and resting together with one another. They already love me. God already loves me. This isn't something I have to keep working for. You see, when we allow ourselves to trust in who God is, we lay those internal things, those internal drivers, be it anxiety, ego, or something else entirely at the feet of Jesus, and we let go of those burdens and we're free again. And if you're like me, it won't take long before you lay it at the feet of Jesus and it feels like such a weight off. And then a day or two later, or sometimes hours later, I'm ready to pick it back up again. And I need a weekly routine to lay it back down, to trust in Jesus, and to realize that I don't have to run nonstop. I don't have to be in control. I am not essential. I can trust in God. And so here's what I would almost equate this to. You heard Philip just a moment ago talk about the practice of tithing. And here on the Hill, we talk about tithing as an expression of generosity, giving 10% of everything that we have. Why? Not because the church needs your money or because God wants your money. God wants to free you from materialism. We practice generosity because God doesn't want you to be consumed by the lie that your security is in how much money that you have in your bank account. So what do? Well, we practice giving it away. We practice getting rid of it as a declaration, as resistance to saying, God, that's not true. You're my provider. And so this is what we do. Sabbath is a similar kind of practice that takes our next most valuable, or what I would argue our top most valuable resource, time, and gives it back to God in order to transform and reorient our hearts. Does God need your time? Does he need 24 hours a week from you? No, he doesn't need it. God's going to do what he wants in his timing. We need it. We need the time away so that God gets to speak to the things in us that drive us and keep us going and move us at a frantic pace so that we can slow down, we can stop, we can rest, and we can experience the transformative work that God has designed the Sabbath to be. The ask is really hard. The ask is really tough. And I feel you. I am right there with you. There are things inside me that say, well, I'd love to Sabbath, but here's my issue. I'd love to Sabbath, but what about all this work that still has to get done? I love to Sabbath, but my kids are a huge challenge. Sabbath sounds great. It sounds like a pipe dream for some of us. But when we begin to practice this, I think you will find the transformative power of God in your life through this. So last week, I gave you guys two ideas, two things to consider to begin to slow down and to stop, especially for those of us who are immediately resistant to this concept. And here are the two ideas. It was identify the lie. What is the lie that you believe that keeps you in motion? What's the lie that you believe that you've got to handle that thing and God can't take care of it? Identify the lie was the first step. And the second step was manage your margin. Carve out the time. When is it during the week you can feasibly set time aside to stop, rest, delight, and worship God and to be in his presence? That was the first step to get us going. Today, two more ideas so that we can not only stop, but once we do stop, we can rest. Here's the first one. Silence the noise. So again, through my vacation and experiences like that, I've found that I can stop working but not really rest. I have found that I can stop and do it in the name of Sabbath and yet miss out on all the transformation that it is designed for. And primarily for me, I found that there's really one of two reasons for that. One, I may not actually rest because it turns out I didn't stop, I just slowed down a little bit. Because if I'm honest with you, on that vacation, I still check my work email most days. And I told myself, well, it's because I don't want to return to work with 500 emails in my inbox. Ugh. And that is nauseating to consider. But if I was really honest, as I begin to sit and go, what's going on here? It's because I felt like I still need to keep an eye on things while I was gone. And I get that one email or that two things and go, oh no, what's that about? And I begin to spin and wonder, and there I am. I've stopped. I'm not at work. I'm away, but my mind's going. It's preoccupied. It's taking my emotional energy away from where I'm meant to be to stop and rest. So that's the issue for many of us is we say that we stop, but really we just slow down. Stop. Let it go. Really stop. And here's the second issue with that for me as well. I find that I can stop but not actually rest because I will stop. I will put aside work, but how I spend my time now is just primarily with entertainment or distraction. Okay, I'll stop from work and I'll turn on Netflix and watch that show, and 2 or 3 hours later, I'm like, oh, where'd the day go? Or I'll just distract myself by scrolling endlessly on social media and checking in on things. And what I found is I've taken a day off work, but I haven't at any point turned my attention towards Jesus. And when I do that, when I just fill my life with noise of entertainment and distraction, that fear that I feel inside of me, that anxiety never gets addressed. Or my ego doesn't get put in check in the way that it needs to be. And so the moment that time is over and I've filled my Sabbath with noise of entertainment and distraction, what ends up happening is I pick back up all those things that I walked away from, but now the burden's even heavier because I've just taken time away from it, but I never laid it at the feet of Jesus. Now I've got less time to handle all of that stuff. I've missed the point entirely. And so here's what I found. The first step I've got to take, I have to prioritize at the beginning of my time of Sabbath, whenever that may be for you, is I've got to silence the noise. I've got to disconnect from my phone, turn off the TV, get away from screens, not do entertainment. Things I may enjoy and are good things. But those are the things that will keep me from the presence of God. And then after I've spent time silencing all the noise, then I'm ready to go do that hobby and enjoy that thing. Then I'm ready to go share a meal with friends and family. Then I'm prepared to encounter God in a profound way because I finally silenced all the stuff in me. That's the first step. You've got to silence the noise. And here's the second. It's just as simple. Silence the noise and hear his voice. Hear his voice. If we're going to silence ourselves and get rid of the distractions and in the entertainment, we need God to come in and to speak to those things in our lives, to speak to that worry, to speak to our ego, to speak to our fears, to speak to our future, to speak to our desire to control and manage situations in our lives so that we can finally let go of it and rest. And so what I do is, for me, is I find that it's helpful to change my environment, get up, go for a walk and pray while I'm walking, go to a coffee shop and bring a journal with me, put my headphones in, listen to worship music that's focused on Jesus, and write down my prayers and what I think God is saying. I just try to hear his voice as I change my environment so that I'm not distracted and I'm not entertained by stuff that are good things, but not ultimate things. And then as I go throughout that time and I find my mind going back to work, and it's circling that worry or that fear, whatever it may be, I just ask God a simple question. Okay, God, what do you have to say about that? That work situation that's got me anxious, what do you think? That family situation that's bigger than me and I feel like I can't manage or things are going to explode soon? God, what do I need to know just for today about that situation? And it's in that place where I've silenced the noise and I hear God's voice. Now I can return home. Now I can go about doing the things that I enjoy through the rest of my time that bring life to me because I've heard God speak. I've sat with his word and I've let it rearrange and transform my mind, and my soul can finally rest. I'm at ease at last because God's spoken and I've sat with him long enough to hear his voice. And here's the thing that happens for me when I get in this place. I prioritize this time. I silence the noise. I hear God's voice. What comes naturally out of me in that moment are the next 2 weeks that we're going to cover. I begin to delight in who God is, in his provision and care in my life. I'm so thankful for all the things that he's doing in me and in my family, my boys and my wife. The things that are happening here on the hill, it's no longer a stress or distraction. It's a celebration of God's goodness. And then I just worship. Aren't you amazing? You're incredible. How are you so good to me? I don't deserve any of this. And yet, God, you are right here with me, addressing my cares, concerns, fears, and need for control. And you love me still through all of this stuff. I stop, I rest, I delight, I worship. And now I've Sabbathed. I've rested, and I've begun to experience the transformative work that this whole day has been designed for. This is the invitation for you and I every week as part of God's family. And so as we come to a close, I want to end with the words of Jesus. He asks these questions. In Matthew 11, are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Stop, rest, delight, and worship. Why? Because we're free. You aren't a slave to anyone or anything by the work of Jesus. This is the idea. Rest is resistance.